By the time you read this letter, I may be dead. I have so much to tell you, and perhaps very little time. Will I ever send it? I don't know.
Hi guys, welcome back. We are talking about A Letter from an Unknown Woman from 1948. This is directed by Max Ophüls. I actually don't know how to pronounce that. He's kind of more of a European director, but this film, it's set in Vienna in 1900, but it is an American film. Or is it American? It might actually be UK. I didn't write it down. Okay, so this was one that I have never seen before, and I haven't really come across it. It seems like it's a classic and is considered to be a very strong film, but it just has kind of passed me by somehow. I haven't had anyone kind of push this on me and be like, oh, you haven't seen this? You must see this. But I'm glad I watched it. I actually really enjoyed it. So Max Ophüls was, he did Lola Montez, and as I said, he was more of a European director. Like many people, he sort of fled to the US to work in cinema when things were not so great for many people in Europe under the Second World War. So that he worked there. And I think he actually ended up going back and didn't stay. But this is one of his English language films. It stars Joan Fontaine. We know her from Rebecca and Suspicion and Gunga Din, which we talked about Gunga Din and Rebecca recently, depending on which order I put these out in. Louis Jourdan is the romantic lead here. His name is Stefan. He was Gaston in Gigi, if you've seen that film. If you haven't, you should. And also stars Mady Christians. She was in Shirley Temple's Heidi, so she's one of those people who you might remember her face from a few things. That she plays Lisa's mother. So those are the players. What is the film about? So it's Vienna. It's 1900, as I said. It's a very kind of romantic location, I think, for a lot of people. Vienna is a beautiful city. But I think at this time in the 40s, a lot of people maybe hadn't traveled. And so this idea of this kind of thing happening in this beautiful European city is like our setting. So Stefan is a dandy. He cares about his clothes. He sort of feels like love is like, he deserves it, but he kind of always throws it away. Like things don't mean anything to him. He has a great talent as a piano player. And when we meet him, he's rushing home to pack a bag because he's going to avoid a duel. He's been challenged to a duel. We kind of get the impression it's not the first time, that he often doesn't really care about women's honor. But while he's packing, he receives a letter from a woman that he does not remember at all. And she starts to tell him her story. And she declares her unrequited lifelong love of him and how it's ruined her life, essentially. So he kind of gets caught up in the story, and that's like the flashback. So it's, even though the film opens on him, it's really Joan Fontaine's film. So Joan Fontaine is Lisa. We first see her as a girl. She's kind of quite young. And she just idolizes him. He moves into a building near her, and she's so innocent and kind of romanticizes him from afar in some way. So he kind of takes advantage of that. She's a character who believes in true love and those kinds of ideals. And he's someone that just believes in instant gratification. So she actually only meets him a few times in the course of this film, but his impact on her life is always there. her sort of imagined relationship with his imagined self, or maybe the best version of himself. So I think there's just 3 meetings between them, but it's enough for her to actually fall pregnant and give birth to his son, but he doesn't remember her. Every time she sees him, he doesn't know who she is. She does end up married to someone else, but she's always pretty clear with people that her heart belongs to this guy, Stefan. So it's interesting because her ideal of Stefan is more real than reality. And I know people that have this, where they can't see the person is worthless because they see the best self in this person, this romantic ideal. And even their suffering for love is kind of, they're happy about that in some way. So she doesn't really, it kind of makes me sad because she doesn't really understand that the husband that she's with, she can't really value him. I think, well, she values him, but he's way more worthy because he marries her even though she's had a child and she wasn't married, which in this period is kind of important. So what's kind of nice about this film is that over the course of reading this letter, he realizes that he's thrown away, and he finally realizes what he's lost, his son and this woman, his chance at like what would have been true love, or she truly loved him, either way, so he makes kind of a decision at the end about how he wants to handle the future. So this kind of impending doom because he's going to this duel in the morning. I think, Lisa's maybe a bit, I said I know people that kind of pine for someone and that person isn't really worth it, but perhaps Lisa is naive by modern standards. I think we kind of understand a bit more now. Like maybe watching this now, you might be like, is any woman like that stupid? But I don't think she is stupid. I think she would have been quite sheltered by her parents, or by her mother specifically, and then she remarries. So I think people's idea of love was different then. And I think even in the 40s, this film was kind of held up as being like, oh, she's such a romantic figure. And I do think that she is. But just don't be too harsh of a critic of her if you watch this, because I think this film is a bit of a melodrama. It is about that drama and that tear jerking. So, take it easy on Lisa. She's not a modern woman. The other thing that I think this film does really nicely is, it's set in 1900, but it came out in 1948, and there was still a real stigma, and it would be around for a long time. I think probably still around now even, of women who have sex or have children outside of being married. That kind of stigma is really tragic. Lisa's not a bad person. She's kind of foolish. She's very romantic. She's probably a little bit naive, but she's not a drunk. She's not, kind of, it would be easy to judge her in many ways, but when you listen or watch her story, you feel kind of differently about her. And I think it's kind of, this film kind of explores that idea of how there is a different set of moral codes. Like a man could do kind of what he wanted and it didn't, you sort of get congratulated, or people would think it was, funny that he just kind of went through women or whatever. But actually, that's something that's very sad about Stefan's character, is that he can never really enjoy anything. He has this talent which doesn't really mean anything to him, and he has these women and they don't really mean anything to him, and so he never really feels anything. He's always chasing something elusive and sort of doesn't even really get to enjoy himself in a way, Whereas on the other hand, when a woman loses her reputation, she loses everything. She can be rejected by her family. She might not be able to get work. So it's very it kind of uses an old school setting to kind of tell this. I mean, she's kind of a victim. Maybe she makes herself a victim, but I feel like that's quite sad that, you know, even in like 48, which feels not that long ago, you know, these kinds of ideas are being explored that, you know, it takes two people for a woman to become a fallen woman. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. So her letter kind of narrates the film and kind of draws us through it. And I really like Joan Fontaine in this film because she really is able to be Lisa at all of these different ages. She's innocent and charming. And when she's a teenager, she's kind of awkward in that way that teenagers are. And then through adulthood to motherhood, she's always her, she's always Lisa, but it's like that physicality that changes over the course of our lives. She really captures that really well. Lisa essentially kind of ruins herself with Stefan. And in the book that this is adapted from, this is much more explicit than it could be on film. And the book is much less romantic. This has a bookend of a duel, and the book does not have that. Lisa is just ruined, and she kind of chooses it because she is that romantic. She wants to throw herself away for love in a way. And what choice does she have? Like a life of nothing or a life of something, but absolute ruin. I don't know, it's very romantic. Very romantic notion. So Joan Fontaine was quite famous in her day for being the sister of Olivia de Havilland. The story goes that they were big rivals. There's some truth in that, but a lot of it was that kind of played up for the press, kind of makes them more interesting if they hate each other. It was played up a little bit, but Olivia was more of her mother's favorite, and apparently Joan had to change her name when she went into acting because her mother wouldn't let her use the Haviland last name. So there's kind of like this sort of toxic shame sort of thing happening of like, almost like she's saying, I won't, if you try to be like your sister, or if you try to have the limelight as well, then you're not one of us anymore. And I think that's really horrible. They were both Oscar nominees in 1942, and Fontaine actually won. She's the younger sister, and the big story at the time was that she sort of rejected Olivia's congratulation. That wasn't exactly true, but the press really lapped that kind of thing up, and it makes for a good story. And I think it's kind of interesting looking back at it now, and kind of seeing how characters were very manufactured by the studios, and people's names were not their real names, and a rivalry or a hatred between two actresses was just, you know, people would just lap it up. They just loved that kind of a story. But in the end, they actually were estranged much later, I think in the 70s. Or maybe the 60s, because Joan Fontaine was away filming something when her mother died, and she sort of like wasn't invited to the funeral. Joan says she wasn't invited. Olivia says that she was, but she said she didn't want to go. So there's kind of two sides of the story there. But the impression that I actually got was that her mother didn't want Joan there. So, I mean, that's some pretty hurtful family dynamic there. So I feel quite sorry for her and Olivia, because I think, you know, having a difficult relationship with a sibling and it being public, it must be incredibly difficult and probably kind of annoying. I imagine it would have been brought up in interviews a lot. So that's kind of Joan Fontaine. and her interesting life. Her and Olivia are both very beautiful. So yeah, there's a really great scene in this film where Lisa is on a train ride through Europe, but it's all fake. There's an orchestra outside and they're in this little kind of carriage thing, and he tells the band to keep playing, and the scenery is like painted and kind of goes past, and it's kind of emblematic of their imaginary relationship. It's all a game, it's all play acting, and Lisa's so desperate to believe it, and Stefan gets such a kick out of creating these romantic scenarios, but he's never really invested in them. And it's such a nice, I don't know, it is very romantic, and it is fun, and it is the kind of thing that you would be delighted by in some kind of a rom-com, but it's all fake, it's all smoke and mirrors. So this film is a lovely study of character. I really like this exploration of Lisa as a character that wants a fantasy over reality, and you kind of wonder how deeply that goes. Like if she really loves Stefan and it's maybe true love and it's kind of this romantic thing, or if it is just that she can't really be real. She's a dreamer maybe, and just has this dream and doesn't ever want it to be taken off the pedestal. I mean, it is melodrama at the end of the day. On the other hand, Stefan as a character is kind of great too. He just kind of fades, really. He's sort of handsome and has all this talent at the start, but he doesn't appreciate it. Things come too easily to him, women come too easily. He can't actually recognize innocent, faithful, real love when it's in front of him. So he just throws it away. And I think that they're sort of perfect for each other in that way, because she almost wants tragic kind of love, and he wants to be seen in this romantic light, but by the end you kind of see he's kind of just a nobody. So he becomes like cynical and wasteful sort of over the course of the film. And I think I like that, because I think I know people kind of like this. Obviously this is on a kind of dramatic movie scale, and it is kind of meant to be very romantic. She's a very romantic figure and he's just not worth it, and you can kind of watch it from that dramatic standpoint and kind of take it for what it is, or you can kind of look at it as a really interesting kind of exploration of the way some people insist on romanticizing things and not living in reality, and the way other people, maybe things come too easily for them and they can't really ever have them because they can't appreciate them, and they can't see the difference between an affair or ruining someone's life, or even how it would affect someone. Stefan doesn't care that he could be ruining her reputation or ruining her life, or he never recognizes her. Even when he gets the letter in the end, which is sort of at the beginning, he doesn't know who she is. She's always an unknown person to him, and that's kind of sad. And I do think people still have this. Sometimes in their relationships they can be overly romantic and not see the truth, or just be in love with being in love, or just need to always have some kind of a conquest. And yeah, I just think that's kind of pretty cool. So that is a Letter from an Unknown Woman from 1948. It's a little black and white film. It's a really good kind of dramatic, tearjerkery Sunday afternoon kind of a watch. I do think it's maybe elements of it have dated a little bit, because I think maybe women are a bit more savvy than they were, and social things have changed a little bit. But it's still a really good, dramatic, well-acted film with some great kind of images and costumes, and it's a good drama. So definitely one to check out.